Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, A Tale of Darkness Rising. Chapter 1: The Other Minister. As twilight descended upon London, an unusual meeting was taking place at 10 Downing Street. The Prime Minister, a man accustomed to handling crises, found himself utterly bewildered by his latest visitor. Cornelius Fudge, former Minister for Magic, had appeared out of the fireplace. His lime green bowler hat askew, and his face etched with worry. "Prime Minister," Fudge began, his voice trembling, "I'm afraid I bring grave news. He who must not be named has returned." The room seemed to darken as Fudge recounted the horrors that had befallen both the magical and Muggle worlds, bridges collapsing, mysterious murders, and an oppressive fog that chilled the very soul. The return of Lord Voldemort had plunged both worlds into a state of terror. As Fudge spoke, the portraits on the wall watched with keen interest, their painted eyes gleaming in the flickering firelight. One portrait in particular, a small, frog-like man, cleared his throat. "To the Prime Minister of Muggles," it said in a crisp, official voice. "Requesting a meeting. Urgent. Kindly respond immediately. Rufus Scrimgeour, Minister for Magic." With a whoosh of green flames, a new figure stepped out of the fireplace. Rufus Scrimgeour, the new Minister for Magic, stood before them, his mane of tawny hair and sharp yellow eyes giving him the look of an old lion. "Prime Minister," Scrimgeour said, his voice commanding attention, "we face dark times. The magical world is at war. And I'm afraid that war is spilling into your world as well." As the three men discussed the dire situation, the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Unbeknownst to the millions of Muggles going about their evening, forces of darkness were gathering, preparing to unleash chaos upon both worlds. Meanwhile, in the quiet suburb of Little Winging, a teenage boy with unruly black hair and a lightning-shaped scar sat by his bedroom window, unaware that he would soon be at the center of the coming storm. Harry Potter's 6th year at Hogwarts was about to begin, and with it a journey that would lead him closer to his destined confrontation with Lord Voldemort. Chapter 2: Spinner's Inn. In a dilapidated neighborhood far from the grandeur of London, two cloaked figures materialized out of thin air. The cobblestone street, shrouded in mist, echoed with their hurried footsteps as they approached a rundown house at the end of Spinner's Inn. Narcissa Malfoy, her pale face streaked with tears, and Bellatrix Lestrange, wild-eyed and suspicious, entered the dimly lit home of Severus Snape. The interior was lined with books, giving the impression of a dark and foreboding library. Snape, his sallow face illuminated by candlelight, regarded his unexpected visitors with cool indifference. "Narcissa, what brings you here at this late hour?" "Severus," Narcissa sobbed, "the Dark Lord. He's chosen Draco for a task I fear he cannot complete." As Narcissa pleaded for Snape's help, Bellatrix circled the room like a predator, her dark eyes gleaming with distrust. "Why should we trust you, Snape?" she hissed. "You who have lived so comfortably under Dumbledore's protection all these years?" Snape's black eyes flashed dangerously. With a flick of his wand, he extinguished all but one candle, plunging the room into near darkness. In the flickering light, he began to speak, his silky voice filled with quiet menace as he recounted his loyalties and sacrifices for the Dark Lord's cause. As the tension in the room reached its peak, Narcissa fell to her knees. "Severus, please, will you make the unbreakable vow?" A heavy silence fell. Even Bellatrix seemed shocked by this request. Snape regarded Narcissa for a long moment before extending his hand. As Bellatrix reluctantly acted as bonder, magical chains of fire wound around their clasped hands, sealing a vow that would have far-reaching consequences. Outside, the mist thickened as if nature itself was trying to obscure the dark promises made that night. In the distance, a clock struck midnight, its somber tolls echoing through the empty streets, heralding the beginning of a year that would change the wizarding world forever. Chapter 3: Will and Won't. The summer air hung heavy over Privet Drive, but inside Number 4, an icy tension permeated the house. Harry Potter sat in his room, surrounded by stacks of newspapers, each headline more ominous than the last. Bridge collapse, suspected Death Eater activity. Dementors breeding fog across Britain. Minister of Magic vows to protect Muggles. A soft tapping at the window drew Harry's attention. An elegant screech owl perched on the sill, a letter bearing the Hogwarts seal tied to its leg. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, Harry unrolled the parchment. Dear Mr. Potter, I will be arriving at Number 4, Privet Drive this coming Friday at 11 p.m. to escort you to the Burrow, where you have been invited to spend the remainder of your school holidays. If you are agreeable, I should also be glad of your assistance in a matter to which I hope to attend on the way to the Burrow. I shall explain this more fully when I see you. Kindly send your answer by return of this owl. Hoping to see you this Friday. I am, yours most sincerely, Albus Dumbledore. Harry's heart leapt. Dumbledore himself was coming to collect him. But what was this matter he needed assistance with? The days crawled by until Friday night arrived. As the clock struck 11, the street lamps on Privet Drive went out one by one, plunging the street into darkness. A tall figure appeared at the end of the drive, his long silver beard gleaming in the moonlight. Dumbledore's arrival sent the Dursleys into a panic. Vernon's face turned an alarming shade of purple as he sputtered indignantly at the wizard in his living room. Petunia clutched at her throat, eyes darting nervously between Dumbledore and the windows, as if afraid the neighbors might see. I assume, said Dumbledore pleasantly, that you were about to offer me refreshment, but it seems your excellent aunt and uncle have not quite accustomed themselves to the idea of my visit. With a wave of his wand, Dumbledore conjured a bottle of oak matured mead in 5 glasses that floated gracefully through the air. As Harry prepared to leave, Dumbledore turned to the Dursleys. As you may know, Harry comes of age in a year's time. No, said Aunt Petunia, speaking for the first time. I'm sorry, said Dumbledore politely. No, he doesn't. He's a month younger than Dudley, and Dudley doesn't turn 18 until the year after next. Ah, said Dumbledore pleasantly, but in the wizarding world, we come of age at 17. The tension in the room was palpable as Dumbledore explained the magical protection that would end when Harry turned 17. The Dursleys, faced with the reality of the magical world they had tried so hard to ignore, sat in stunned silence as Harry and Dumbledore stepped out into the night. The young wizard couldn't help but feel that a chapter of his life was closing. Little did he know the adventures and dangers that lay ahead would test him more than ever before. Chapter 4: Horace Slughorn. Harry and Dumbledore apparated with a crack, materializing in a quiet village square. The night air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle, and distant church bells chimed midnight. Where are we, sir? Harry asked, looking around curiously. This, Harry, is the charming village of Budleigh Babberton, Dumbledore replied, his eyes twinkling behind his half-moon spectacles. We have a task to complete before we head to the Burrow. They approached a house with a dark, overgrown garden. As they neared, Dumbledore suddenly stopped, raising his wand. "Wand's out, Harry." Inside, they found a scene of utter devastation. Furniture was overturned, a grandfather clock lay shattered on the floor, and crystal chandelier fragments glittered in the moonlight streaming through broken windows. "Oh dear," murmured Dumbledore. "This does not bode well." As they surveyed the wreckage, Dumbledore approached an overstuffed armchair. With a swift movement, he prodded it with his wand. "Ouch!" the armchair yelped, transforming into an enormously fat, bald old man, who was massaging his lower belly and squinting up at Dumbledore with an aggrieved expression. "There was no need to stick the wand in that hard," he said gruffly, clambering to his feet. "It hurt." The man was Horace Slughorn, a former Hogwarts professor whom Dumbledore hoped to persuade out of retirement. As they talked, Harry realized he was being subtly displayed. Like a prize exhibit, Slughorn's eyes kept darting to Harry's forehead, to the lightning-shaped scar hidden beneath his messy black hair. The old professor's interest was palpable, a mixture of curiosity and calculation in his piggy eyes. As Dumbledore excused himself to use the bathroom, Slughorn turned his full attention to Harry. "You look very like your father," he said, his eyes moving to Harry's face. "Except for your eyes. You've got my mother's eyes, yeah." Harry finished for him, having heard it countless times before. "Humph. Yes. Well, you shouldn't have favorites as a teacher, of course, but she was one of mine." "Your mother," Slughorn added. "Lily Evans. One of the brightest I ever taught. Vivacious, you know. Charming girl." As Slughorn reminisced about Lily and the many famous witches and wizards he had taught, Harry began to understand Dumbledore's plan. He was being used as bait, a temptation to lure Slughorn back to Hogwarts. When Dumbledore returned, Slughorn seemed to come to a decision. With a mixture of resignation and excitement, he agreed to return to Hogwarts. As they left, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter with Slughorn was just the beginning of something much larger.